to Money Talks. This week we'll look into some legal issues involving evictions and money laundering that may arise between landlords and tenants. Now let's look at how a landlord gets paid. Ideally, you want your rent to be paid to you by direct debit through the tenant's bank account. Sometimes that's not feasible. Sometimes a tenant would prefer to pay you cash, depending on your lease, whether it's every week, every month, every quarter. And you would have to know the laws of your country to see what will work best for you. Then there is also the matter of whether you find the tenant yourself or whether you have an agent who will be collecting the money. If you have an agent collecting your rent, it is best not to accept a cash rental. Too much can happen between the time the tenant pays the rent in cash to the agent, or says he did, to the time that it actually goes into your bank account as a landlord. So to summarise, if the tenants want to pay cash, there should not be a middleman involved, and it should be done in accordance with the law of the land. For example, in the UK, you have to declare a cash transaction over £5,000. And the reason for that is a legal issue. The UK wants to make sure you aren't setting up a money laundering operation as part of your property investment business. I remember when I had my property investment business, a group of 6 Russians came into the office looking for a house to rent. Their plane had just landed and they were just about to start jobs as labourers. What they had was £20,000 in cash, and they wanted to pay a year's rent in advance. They needed a large house because the 6 of them were going to share that house. Since the UK laws were that I couldn't accept more than £5,000 in cash, it seemed as though we were up against a brick wall. They already had offers of jobs that they had secured before arriving in the UK. So we suggested that they ask their employers to be guarantors for them for the remaining rental. Once we'd done this, they flew through the referencing and they were able to move into the property the same day. These laws change frequently, so make sure you stay on top of them. To all intents and purposes, the best plan of action at this time seems to be to have the money deposited into your account directly from the tenant's bank account. Last week I spoke to you about some of the difficulties that can arise in different countries around the issue of eviction. Today I'd like to talk about another aspect of the legal issue around eviction. It had taken me quite a while to refurbish this apartment and to find a creditworthy tenant. Everything checked out. Her money was going to be taken by direct debit from her bank and deposited into my bank account. It was a single woman whose appearance was very clean. She had a good paying job and she seemed easy enough to deal with. I was ecstatic. After about 8 weeks, the police contacted me in relation to this tenant. They said I had to keep a very low profile because my tenant had a boyfriend living with her and they were under surveillance for drugs. I contacted her employer and they said that they'd fired her. And so I was planning that if she didn't pay the next month's rent, that I would have to file an eviction order. But the police told me that I could not evict her while she and her boyfriend were under surveillance. So I asked them, well, how long could that surveillance might last? Because I wasn't getting any rental money. And they said they had no idea. It could take a week, a month, or a year. But in the meantime, my hands were tied. I couldn't break the law, but I figured out a way to go around it. I offered her a small cash payment and writing off her debt of the money she owed me if she would move that same day. I said not tomorrow, but today. She assured me that she would be out by the end of the day, and we arranged a time when I would come to the apartment, do an inspection, give her the money and say goodbye to her. No, I didn't evict her. I was well within the law as she left voluntarily. But as a prospective landlord, you need to be aware that these situations can and often do arise. So you either have to be prepared to wait it out or figure out another way to salvage the situation. Now, if you still want to be a landlord, go for it. Of the evictions I've had to serve, the one that stands out in my memory was the one that was requested by the tenant because of the laws. She'd applied for council housing, and the law was that she could not qualify for a council house unless she had an eviction notice from her existing residence. It was a very amicable agreement. She continued to pay her rent. I put the wheels of eviction into motion. Then when she was evicted, she qualified for council housing. Sometimes you can see rationale behind laws. Many times you cannot. The laws regarding qualifying for council houses defy logic. It would make far more sense to ask the person to bring in their income tax return or their benefit statement, showing their income, proving their need for a council house because they can't afford a private tenancy agreement. So to summarise, try to have your rent paid by direct debit directly from the tenant or your agent into your bank account. Know the laws regarding money laundering and cash in your country. And be sure you have the emotional stamina and the finances to deal with legal issues to keep up with the ever-changing legal environment between the landlord and the tenant. Stay tuned, I'll be right back.